thank you for Open Forest for the opportunity of presenting here and explain a little bit about the work that we started not long ago, so we are in the beginning of a long journey, hopefully. So I will be presenting one of our initiatives that is called Biriba, and it's about food security and social biodiversity regeneration. So just a little bit about myself. So as Emilia said, I have 20 years of experience developing international projects. I've worked in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and so I founded UBA after this 20 years of experience because I really think that I have my own perspective now of the way of intervening and how we really need to talk about how to conserve social biodiversity, not only biodiversity. And of course, like at the beginning of my profession, I started working with ecosystem service because I really think that it's important for us to integrate the externalities. So it's the cost that we neglect when we produce foods and any other goods. UBA, so we have 2 years of life. And we have 15 initiatives in the pipeline. We are operating in 3 continents, so we are operating actually, whoa, that was me? No, it's a lot of emotions. Well, I can still talk. So we are also part of the Climate Neutral Now initiative from the UNFCCC. We are also an official supporter of the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration. And we have been developing these projects with supports of it's a blended finance mechanism that we have sponsors, but also private actors that are willing to engage in the projects. Okay. Well, so Open Forest asked me to explain a little bit how it started, like why am I developing those projects. And so the story is that I come from a region in Brazil, so I'm originally Brazilian. I'm a forestry engineer with a master in sustainable development, and I worked in several organizations as the technical director of climate change unit. So I've been working in the climate space for a long time. And actually the seed that grew into me is that the reality is that we have a landscape that is monoculture from where I come from. So it's a lot of sugarcane, eucalyptus plantations. And when I was a kid, they used to use fire before for the sugarcane plantations in order to facilitate the harvest. And the harvest was done by like people, and it was not it's very likely with work conditions similar to slavery. So this is the situation that I met when I was a kid, and then we used to feel the pollution of the air every season when there was the burning season. Now the machines, they are cheaper, so the producers are using more machines to harvest, but nevertheless, that's the memory of my childhood. So my idea is that knowing that Brazil is a tropical country, we can grow forests, we have a huge biodiversity, why don't we learn to produce differently? Why do we have to reproduce monoculture and degradation methods? So that's how it started, actually. Well, the Biriba program, we call it program because it is a long-term view. So most of our initiatives, we call it program because it's a 30-year, a minimum intervention. So we are now, in terms of achievement, we have implemented 45 hectares of mechanized and semi-mechanized agroforestry. Those systems, they are important because we are looking into commodities as well. So cocoa, coffee, we have also cupuaçu, including native species. We are focusing on mechanized, semi-mechanized, and non-mechanized systems because we think that to get to scale, we need to mechanize as well. So we need to rethink the way we are doing agriculture and the way we are producing food. We have already mapped more than 500 hectares of people that would like to get involved, and we are checking the eligibility and the due diligence of the areas that we could work with and the farmers. We have an involvement during this 1.5 years that we have been developing the initiatives. We have already more 20 farmers that are engaged. We have 30 MOUs that with different partners that we are implementing the projects, because if you think, so we are focusing in São Paulo and Bahia, but if you think at the Brazil scale, it's like if I was doing a project in Portugal and the team was in Finland or whatever. So we are creating regional hubs because it makes more sense logistically, and because of also in the environmental conditions, it's way better to have people that are close to those farmers and, oops, sorry. And so another thing that we're focusing now after this first, let's say, scouting of land is to focus more on women leaders, farmers, because it is a big barrier to have more women as a farmer in the farming, and also to recognize the role that they have in cultivating food. Another thing that we are also working on is the study and structuration of supply chains. So to link to commodities buyers so that we can create clusters of production, so a kind of productions basins, so that we can connect already with the buyers, because it's a long-term view. And then for us, as a solution for permanence, is that those plantations, they have to create income. So we are also doing restoration work. So for example, in Brazil, if you take a landscape approach, so you have the riparian areas, you have we have a legal context that is quite peculiar, because we have legal reserves and so on. So the idea is to restore those areas, but also work in the productive plots. So this is Francisco, one of our farmers. And Marina also, that works with me. So in terms of the challenges, of course, is always the funding. That's what we are here for, actually. There is a challenge of having the upfront funding to support the planting. In Brazil, we have a specific situation that we have inflation. Well, this is not specific to Brazil. Europe is also going through inflation. But in Brazil, we have inflation, and we have also some difficulties in the tax comparative system. For example, for soil, for people to export soil, they don't pay VAT. So compared to that, like for organic producers or any other people that are trying to do more regenerative agriculture, it's not competitive, actually. So we have a few challenges in the term of because it demands more inputs for agroforestry. For example, you have to have the trees, you have to have the labor and the preparation of soil and the maintenance and the quality of the materials as well. So you need to have a pre-investment. We are also, in terms of like the challenges of designing, we have to include social and welfare availability. So our initial focus is to work with rural settlements. In Brazil, the agrarian reform never took place. So that's why we have what we call it latifúndios. So it's those huge plots since the colonization. I'm sorry, it has its own life. And so the idea is to work with people that have struggled to have access to land. So we have we call it another program, but it's the similar intervention. It's Jussara, that we are working with people that were previous rural workers that didn't have access to land. And so they go through a process of having access to land through INCRA, that it's a governmental agency that is supposed to redistribute the land. Lands that are unproductive, or either if they have debts towards the state. This process is really lengthy, and it depends on the government. So, for example, during Bolsonaro's governments, of course, nothing was done, and now we may see some changes, but still, the situation of those people in terms of land tenure, it's quite specific, and even more for women. So one of the ideas is that we were focusing on more, so people that are poor, actually, they don't have capital to invest, but then we had to adapt a little bit the design to integrate small to medium people as well, farmers, because in terms of scale, of course, if we want to go faster in terms of the objectives, we also have to integrate those people. and because they are also part of the transition. Since there are a lot of neo-rurals, and as we know, everywhere in the world we have a problem of exodus of rural residents. So everything we do to keep people producing food, healthy food, it will be a positive. So another challenge that we have, so that I already mentioned actually, is to cope with the lack of tenure rights from women, and sometimes the need for juridical and financial support in the terms of, for example, accessing credit or different tools that they could use to have this upfront investment for the plantations. Another challenge is, of course, the technical support for agroforestry and restoration. We must know that, well, those techniques, although there are a lot of traditional techniques that can be quite similar, it's not easy to implement itself in the long term, and how to manage all those plants and the different times of harvesting and so on. So this could be quite challenging. That's why there is a need of following up technically the plantations, and of course the restoration of native forests, actually, that you have. For example, in Brazil, there is a huge demand now for restoration because of the carbon markets that actually gave a big boom. But we have a bottleneck of the seeds, for example. So we have to work not only on the supply chain of the products, like commodities, like products, but also in the supply chain of restoration. So work with bank seeds and develop like communities that could work at identifying the trees, and so to have a diverse genetic material and respecting traditions, and sometimes, for example, the fact that there are indigenous communities, quilombolas, and other types of ways of dealing with the nature and the territory. So in terms of the solution, of course, is the upfront investment, and we also are considering a microfinance mechanism, especially for women. We would like also to give juridical and legal support for fighting against land tenure inequalities, and, for example, for the financial paperwork. And, for example, to have access to credit line, as I mentioned before. We are also creating regional hubs of assistance, including legal, financial, and agrarian environmental aspects, and the connection with end buyers, so that we have a very long-term view when we are proposing to someone, you know, you should plant vanilla, and then you don't have nobody to buy the vanilla after, so it doesn't make any sense. So the idea is already to connect those, in the long term, and propose to the corporates to have an in-setting approach, that is, doing the carbon, buying products that are agroecological and carbon neutral, or at least have the footprint that it's known. So our future vision for this program is to have the progressive implementation of 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 hectares of mechanized, semi-mechanized agroforestry systems and forest restoration. The target being 2,000 hectares. To implement the regional hubs, to structure the supply chains of the standing forest service and products, and also the bioeconomy. And, well, to have commodities that will be organic and climate friendly. Mostly, of course, we are working with coffee, cocoa, and could be vegetable oils, essential oils, and so on. Our target is 400 families, and we would like to achieve, to have 60% of women-led farms. But it's really challenging. I won't hide. So the future vision that we have is of course like to green again the landscape, to have more a bigger canopy. There we have this is a cocoa cabruca system in Bahia. It's a traditional system that it's a shadowed cocoa plantation. It's very old, and this is how the systems that we are implementing look. So we have here coffee as well. Then there is cocoa, bananas, glycidia because they create the biomass, and so on. And we have one of the farmers leaders, that is Clarissa, that is explaining here for one of our clients that actually how you keep the soil, how you keep, what is the importance to keep the soil cover, and how we create like the idea of leaving the biomass in the soil so that we can integrate, of course, carbon, but also all the other micro, meso, and flora of the soil. Yeah, it's repeated, but this is Clarissa again. And the idea of the future vision is not only to show the ecosystems, like let's say the aerial view of the areas, but also show that this is built with people, and then this is a construction of how you can actually implement a project. If there is no dialogue, if there is no like we are working with the farmers, is their plots, so we cannot impose a system to them. So you could see from the other presentations that each agroforestry system might be quite different, which is for carbon quite challenging to account for that. But it must be in respect of the communities and with them. So the idea is also, I'd like to bring it up, that the fact that this dialogue is necessary because, for example, if we're talking about impact in the long term, there are contracts, in order to avoid a kind of neo-colonialism of arriving and saying, yeah, you have to do that, this is good. And it's very challenging for them to understand. And also, so in terms of the financial input, we are very ambitious, so we need, like if we estimate the project within its 30 years, we would need to achieve like $13.8 million US. Of course, this will vary according to the number of hectares and how we can actually develop the microfinance tool that we would like to develop. So in year 1, 2, and 3 is from 1.5 to $3 million over 6 years. In terms of the return of investments, of course, we have the trees planted and grow, as Paul rightly said, because it's not easy. It's easy to plant, but to keep them there is different. The carbon sequestered, the organic goods from the standing forest. We could also work with the insetting programs and microfinance instruments, and itself, women empowerment, that by itself, it's a big impact that if I die and I do something for that, I'll be very happy. In terms of the monitoring, well, I come from a carbon background, so we implement all the metrics that actually carbon requires us. So in terms of the due diligence, we include that in the due diligence of the areas and the analysis of how to implement. So, of course, we have to do the baseline assessments, the land use, land tenure, and assess the livelihoods of people. The idea is also to prove that those systems will generate income and will improve livelihoods of people. We also use drones and we develop our own monitoring and development, sorry. We also use So we use the Explorer.land platform, and we have a socio-economic follow-up with the forests and agroforestry products that we're also developing. And in terms of the plantation systems, we have, of course, the number of trees, the products, the yields. And one thing that we are always looking, as I said, is the carbon content in the biomass and in soil. That is something really key for agroforestry. So how to measure the carbon in soil, which is quite expensive for now, but I really think that this will be improved very soon. So I think just to summarize, my time is really up. The idea is that UBA is here. I created this organization to connect the people, visions, and the sustainability aspirations. So we have other projects on the ground that are also in the Explorer.land platform. We have Jussara, Ibirá, Biriba that I just present to you, and we also have a project in the Philippines that is starting out with responsible marine protected areas. There we are working with the protection of mangroves, silviculture, and so on. We also sell carbon offsets with a due diligence process and transparency, not only our projects, but from our partners. And we also give advisory on regenerative economy. Thank you very much.